Your manager already knows something you don't. In the week that knowledge arrived, something else started. Think about the last few months at your job, not your performance. Forget that for a second. Think about the environment. Has anything been formalized that used to be casual? Has feedback that used to be a quick conversation started arriving in writing? Has your manager's tone become careful in a way you can't quite name? Because careful is not the same as considerate, and you need to know the difference before it costs you. Start with the documentation. Think about whether anyone at your job has recently asked you to write up how you do what you do, to formalize a process that worked perfectly fine informally, to train someone else on your responsibilities, framed as cross-coverage, backup capacity, team resilience, or whether institutional knowledge that lived in your head has quietly been moved into shared systems, written records, structured files that exist without you. That request feels administrative. It is not administrative. There is one question every organization has to answer before it eliminates a role. Can the work continue without this person? The documentation, the cross-training, the workflow write-ups, that is the organization answering that question before you know it's being asked. The preparation isn't about efficiency. It's about making your absence executable. And once that question has been answered, the justification for your role is gone before you've been told. Watch for the oversight shift next. Your manager starts copying senior leadership on emails they previously handled independently. Decisions that lived at your team level start escalating upward. Leadership becomes more visible in your department, present in meetings they used to skip, asking questions with a specificity they never had before. This reads like your team is being noticed. It reads like interest. It is not engagement. It is audit behavior. Leadership is verifying that a reduction is executable before they authorize it. The visibility is due diligence. Once due diligence is complete, the decision gets finalized. The increased presence is not a good sign. It is the last confirmation step before something is set in motion. And then the metrics appear. Standards that were technically always in place but never enforced suddenly become central. Output tracking, response times, project completion rates, not because the work changed, but because the record needs to reflect something specific. Measurement that was absent for months or years doesn't return for operational reasons. It returns because a narrative is being assembled. Now here's why all of it is happening, and this is the thing nobody tells you directly. Most people believe layoffs are sudden. They're not internally. The financial planning that precedes workforce reductions begins months earlier, inside budget cycles and headcount review meetings that operate on a completely different calendar than yours. By the time anyone schedules a conversation with HR in the room, the structural question has already been asked and answered. The announcement is the last thing that happens. What you were watching in the weeks before was the infrastructure being built around the decision that had already been made. And the most important part of that decision has nothing to do with your performance. There is a difference between performance risk and position risk. Performance risk means your job is in danger because of how you're doing it. Position risk means your job is in danger because of what it is, not how you're doing it, what it is. Most layoffs are position decisions. The role was financially designated as inconvenient, too expensive for what it produces, too distant from revenue, too redundant after a structural shift. A high performer in a targeted role gets cut before an average performer in a critical one. The strong review, the good relationship with your manager, the years of consistent output, none of that reverses a position decision because none of that was the variable being weighed. Working harder does not resolve position risk. If your role is what's been selected, not your behavior, your role, then effort aimed at performance is effort aimed at the wrong target. The system isn't measuring what you're producing, it's measuring whether your function needs to exist at all. Those are completely different questions with completely different answers. One you can influence, one you cannot. Now go back to your manager. When did they stop talking about your future? Not dramatically, just when did that stop appearing in conversation? When did feedback shift from pointing you somewhere to describing where you currently are? When did you last leave a one-on-one feeling like they were investing in your trajectory versus simply noting your present state? Those two things feel similar. They are not the same. When a manager knows a role is being eliminated, developing the person in that role becomes something they cannot make themselves do. So the mentorship fades, not suddenly, quietly. The future-oriented language disappears. Feedback goes neutral, technically accurate, directionless. The tone becomes careful and measured in a way that can read as professionalism. But they are not managing your development anymore. They are managing a situation. Those two postures look almost identical until you know what you're looking at. Shortly after, HR presence increases without announcement. Conversations that used to stay between you and your manager start producing written summaries afterward. A performance issue that would previously have warranted a quick word becomes a formal discussion with a follow-up record. Nothing about the tone is necessarily hostile. It often gets quieter, more precise. But precision at that stage has a function. It becomes the record that later justifies what was already decided. This is how a financial decision becomes a performance narrative, not through fabrication, through selective documentation. The gaps existed. They weren't treated as serious until the financial decision required a justification. The record gets completed. The layoff reads as merit-based. The cost logic stays out of view. And here is where the trap closes, and it closes on nearly everyone. You sense something is wrong. The environment has shifted. The distance is real. The formality is real. The feedback has changed in a way you feel but cannot name. Your responsibilities may have quietly contracted. You still have the title, still attend the meetings, but the actual decision-making authority, the substantive work, has been redistributed piece by piece under the cover of workload balancing. You're still in the room. There's just less of the room that's yours. And what do most people do? They work harder. Longer hours, more visible effort, more output aimed directly at the one variable that was never the actual issue. They burn through whatever reserves they have left, trying to fix something that was never a performance problem. And while they're doing that, while they're focused entirely inward, they are not doing the one thing that would actually change their situation. Now place yourself honestly into this next part. Mid-career employees with mid to high salaries are disproportionately selected. Not because they perform worse, because the math works against them. They cost more and can be replaced by 2 junior hires at lower total cost. That calculation doesn't require any performance failure. It requires a spreadsheet and someone willing to make the call. Employees whose entire value is tied to a single project or client are vulnerable the moment that project contracts. When the project shrinks, the justification for the role shrinks with it. There is no organizational redundancy protecting them. Roles that exist to support operations rather than generate revenue, administration, coordination, internal process, anything where the output stays internal, are the first reviewed in a cost cycle. Not because they're unimportant, because they're difficult to defend in a budget meeting with a revenue number attached to the conversation. And employees without internal advocates, people who are excellent at their jobs but unknown above their direct manager, have no one in the room saying their name when retention decisions are being argued at the executive level. Excellent work that is invisible upward doesn't protect you in those conversations. If no one above your manager knows what you've built or what you solved, there is no one to push back when your name comes up. Loyalty does not change this. Tenure does not change this. Years of strong reviews do not reverse a structural decision. Not because companies are malicious, because the system that makes these decisions runs on cost modeling, not recognition. Knowing this is not defeat. It is the only accurate map of the terrain you're actually navigating.
Here is what changes your position. Start documenting your own contributions in formats that exist outside the organization's systems, in your own files, in your possession. Outcomes, metrics, decisions you influenced, problems you solved. A record that belongs to you and travels with you regardless of what happens inside any one organization. Build external professional visibility now, not when you need it urgently, not as emergency job search behavior, as a standing practice. Connect with people in your field before you have a reason to. Have conversations with your external network before you need to explain why you're having them. Preparation that begins before the signals are obvious is preparation that actually works. By the time the signals are obvious, the process is usually well underway. Know which of your skills transfer, not your job title, your skills. The title is the container your value currently occupies. Containers get eliminated. Skills move.
Go to work tomorrow and watch the environment, not anxiously, analytically. Notice what's being documented that wasn't before. Notice what your manager is no longer saying. Notice whether your scope has quietly narrowed. Notice who is suddenly in rooms they used to stay out of. The organization will not tell you what it's planning, but the planning has a shape, and you've just learned to read it. The people who move first aren't lucky. They're paying attention while everyone else is waiting to be told. Now you know what to look for.